Welcome back. When teams first start building evaluations, they almost always reach for the same thing: generic metrics like truthfulness, hallucination, toxicity, and coherence. They sound important, and every evaluation framework offers them out of the box. But therein lies the issue. Generic evals measure things that sound universally important without telling you anything specific about whether your product is working according to the standards that matter to the specific product that you're creating. Say your bookstore assistant recommends a book that isn't in stock, or worse yet, is not in inventory. That's a real failure insofar as the customer gets excited about a book that they can't buy. As such, the trust in the assistant drops. Would a generic truthfulness eval catch that? Probably not. The recommendation might be truthful in the literal sense. The book exists in the real world, but it isn't available in the store system, and that's a gross lack of specificity. Or imagine that the assistant drafts a response that's polite and grammatically correct, and mentions real books, but recommends literary fiction to someone who asked for a thriller. A generic coherence check would pass it. A generic toxicity check would pass it as well. Every single generic eval would give it a green light, and the customer would still walk away without buying anything. This is the core issue of generic evaluations. They measure ideals and not outcomes. They tell you the output looks reasonable in general terms. They don't tell you whether it does the specific job that your product needs to do. Targeted evaluations take an entirely different approach with the same tools. A targeted eval is built from a real failure pattern that you've observed in your system. It doesn't start with what should we measure in theory, but rather what is going wrong in practice. The process goes a little bit like this. You look at your production logs, you annotate the outputs, and you mark what worked and what didn't, and you start to see patterns. Maybe the assistant constantly fails to check inventory before recommending books. Maybe it suggests titles from the wrong genre when the customer's request is ambiguous. And perhaps it forgets to offer a book request when something is out of stock, which is just one of its core jobs. Each of those patterns, when observed sufficiently, becomes a targeted evaluation. Not, is this response truthful, but instead, did the assistant only recommend books that are currently in stock? The difference matters, because targeted evals are actionable. When a targeted eval fails, you know what went wrong and where to look. When a generic eval fails, however, the solution or cause is not entirely evident. There's another problem with generic evals that's more subtle. They create a false sense of security. If your dashboard shows 95% truthfulness and 98% coherence, it feels like everything is fine. But those numbers can stay high while your product is failing in ways that actually matter to users. Targeted evals are honest. They measure the things that affect product quality and the failures that matter. And because they're specific, they connect directly to your improvement process. When you know that recommending out-of-stock books is your biggest failure mode, you can improve the prompt in ways to check inventory first and then measure whether the fix worked. So, how do you get from generic to targeted evaluations? You start with humans that know what they should expect from the output. You look at real outputs, annotate them, and find the patterns. This is the annotation step in the reliability loop. If you'd like to know more about that, we'll link a video below. In this course, we won't build a single generic eval. Every single evaluation we create will be targeted and born from a specific failure pattern in our bookstore assistant. Next, we'll talk about when and where these evaluations actually run. We'll get into the difference between online and offline evaluation and why you need both.